time around on Author's Corner, I am really pleased to introduce you to Sidney Phelps Little. The name of his book, One Step from Glory, America in World War I. And many of you know that I love history and I love talking about World War I and World War II. So what a privilege it is to speak with him here on America Tonight with me, Kate Delaney. Sidney, thanks for hopping on.
I appreciate being here and I appreciate talking with you.
Tell me why you wrote the book. What made you write this book?
Okay, this book was written mainly because my father was part of this artillery unit in World War I. And as a result of the gas attacks, I believe had a lingering effect on his life. And he died at the age of 39. At that time, I was only 2. So I didn't get to know my father. And as a result, I wanted to do research to find out what it was that drove his life and what was the most effective or the most impactful thing on him, and that had to be the war in Europe. And as we shared similar genetic features, I decided to research the war. So I pictured myself in his shoes, in the shoes of other participants, and what their reactions and mine would have been. Because at that time, I felt that I shared genetic background with my father, that my feelings might have been very close to his. So I did a lot of digging into World War I through the library, through the internet. And that's where I came up with the story. And I wanted to have the story expand beyond my father and to see why we, America, had entered the war.
And boy, you know, in your book, you talk about all kinds of things. You talk about finalizing for war. You talk about to the line. You talk about in the very beginning chapters before that, call to national service. You talk about the call to arms. And that's always fascinated me, and I'm sure many of you listening too. Tell me what you talk about in the call to arms and the call to national service.
Well, my father at the time was a freshman at the University of Illinois. And after President Wilson declared war on Germany, he wanted to go into the war. I don't know why, but he wanted to join and to go out and fight the enemy in France. So he joined a National Guard unit that was situated in Champaign, Illinois. And soon after the end of the 1917 spring semester, that unit was activated and called to war. They were shipped up to Chicago, where they had further training. From there, they moved into New York, where they were joined with the 42nd Division. And from there, they were shipped out to France, where they had further training. Now, this was basically training in the artillery. Things had changed since America had been in the Spanish-American War. Weapons had been upgraded. You had multi-firing cannon. You had improvements in the machine guns. You had airplanes flying overhead and dropping bombs. So war had changed, and it had changed every aspect from civilian life to the lives of the soldiers involved.
Yeah, and so boy, life would have been so much different. Like you say, he was at the university, and now all of a sudden he's serving. And you talk about same thing, to the line. And I think so many that went off didn't really know what to expect. Do you think so? Is that what you found in writing your book?
Yes. One of the things that was interesting, as he was in the artillery, American artillery was far behind what had been developed in Europe. So instead of taking American guns and ammunition to Europe, they went to Europe to use French guns, which were highly sophisticated. As a matter of fact, the 75 millimeter cannon they used during World War I was also employed in World War II. because of its advanced mechanisms of returning the barrel back to position and with a breech loading of ammunition. So it could fire probably 18 to 20 rounds per minute if the crew operating it was good. Now, my father was a mechanic as for the guns, and so I used that as his position with the 49th Field Artillery, the 149th.
And it's interesting. I want to make sure everybody knows One Step from Glory, America in World War I. You can get this on, you can get it anywhere where great books are sold, but you can get it certainly on Amazon, etc. And you talk about in this as you're detailing it for us. It's interesting. You think about the impact of the war and that it cost America over 100,000 casualties. So then you look at your father and you wonder, imagine what was going through his mind.
Well, these are important elements. In that loss of life of American troops, America really didn't start fighting the war as full divisions until late in 1917, and the war ended in November 11th, 1918. So when you lose 100,000 troops, you can see how vicious and dirty that war was.
And so for you in going through this, and it's a story. I mean, you talk about fears, things we just talked about. You talk about friendships that were obviously very important. You talk about feelings and all of that, and what the combat situations were like during this war for the first time in history. When people read your book, what do you hope they take away, Sidney?
Well, there are a number of things that I like them to take away. First of all, war is dirty. It's an evil action of man against man. And I want them to take away, and the way I've written the book, is what it is like to jump out of a trench, up over the parapet, cross over no man's land into machine gun and rifle fire and cannon fire, work their way through the barbed wire to the enemy trench to capture maybe prisoners or to take that position. I want them to know what it was like to get into a open cockpit of a biplane and feel the slipstream against their face as they take off and go up into the air to fight an enemy plane, or as they go down and help support troops on the ground by strafing enemy trenches. I want them to know what it's like to have an engine out and no place to land, and how they are to survive such a situation. I also want them to know what it was like. The caissons and the cannon were drawn by horses, and what it was like to have the drivers, as they pushed the horses back into the traces, harnessed and hitched them, to hear the dropping of the tailgate and the sliding of the case of the ammunition onto the platform of the caisson, and to hear the drivers shout and encourage the horses as they race to the guns. It is a book of action. I think to much of the extent, I hope that the reader will find themselves in that action and able to discern how difficult it was to fight such a war as World War I.
Yeah, and you really get that sense when you read the book. I want to say something about you too, because you had a business, you sold a business, but you also were a flight instructor at Kirtland Air Force Base at the Flight Center. What was that like for you? Because that makes me think of, again, a connection to your dad.
Well, I've always loved flying, and I did get my license as a pilot when I was at the University of Illinois. And I sold the business in the late 90s, and I, as an instructor, decided to go and teach people how to fly. So that was basically what I did. I was able to put a number of hours in the air and be able to get other people to love flying as I did.
Well, what a terrific book. And you will feel like you're right in the middle of it. One Step from Glory, America in World War I. Sidney, thank you so much for joining us.
Just one final thing is that in Washington, the National Monument to World War I soldiers was opened in, I believe, October of last year. So it's something that the book follows as well as the monument.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Thanks for bringing that up for the listeners. And that's something that you should all put on your lists when you go to DC, and especially read the book, and then you'll feel like you're walking right there in the footsteps for sure. Sidney, thanks.
Thank you. It's good talking with you.